Welcome to Tommy Solo's Famous Friends. This is where I get to chat with people I've connected with over the years in the world of arts and entertainment. And today I'm very happy to have with me legendary bluesman Steve Strongman. Welcome to the show, Steve.
Thanks, Tommy. Nice to have me on. I appreciate it. Thanks.
Well, it is absolutely my pleasure. So, I understand that you recently were involved in the production and in the performing on the Fabulous Thunderbirds' 50th anniversary album, and there are two Grammy nominations. So, congratulations. And how did you get involved with the Thunderbirds?
Yes, thank you very much. That all happened because it was an idea that Jeff Kulovic at Stony Plain Records had, and I had signed a publishing deal through Jeff Kulovic and their publishing art from Linus Entertainment here in Canada. And Stony Plain Records had offered me a recording contract, and so I did a record for them. And he thought it was going really, really well, and he suggested he was interested in working with Kim Wilson from the Fabulous Thunderbirds. I guess Jeff had seen Kim and the band perform, and he thought, "Man, these are great. I'd love to hear what Steve could do with Kim." So we Jeff approached Kim to see if he'd be open and interested in writing with me. And so I flew to California to do some work with him, not knowing that Kim had predetermined that this was not going to go well and he was ready to send me home that night. But it did go very, very well. And in the first day, we had a couple of tunes, and I stayed for a week, and we had written 5 songs. And I thought that was really the end of it. And then a little while later, like 2 weeks later, they called me back and said, "Why don't you come back and do some more writing with Kim's?" Because it just went so well. So I went back, flew up to California to stay with out there and write some more songs with him, and we ended up writing 17 songs. And then after that, we hit the studio, and it was a very organic process, and it was amazing. To get a chance to work with a legendary band like that was pretty awesome.
No kidding. And you've had quite the storied career yourself. So, if you don't mind, I'd like to go back in time now and tell me, when did you first decide that you wanted to be a musician in the first place? And was the guitar your first instrument?
Yeah, guitar was definitely it. I'm not sure exactly what happened that made me decide at 10 years old that I wanted to come. I probably, saw something on TV. I can't remember exactly, but I was into playing guitar. And then I got really serious about it at about the age of 16. And either good or bad, I knew what it was I was going to do. And I started playing shows when I was 16 years old in bars and clubs and anywhere I could lie about my age that would have me. And really that was it. I was bit by the bug at a really young age, and I knew that's what I was going to do.
Cool. Now, were you always playing the music that you love to play, or did you have to do like I had to go and play in bands like as a sideman and do stuff like I had to play Barry Manilow songs for crying out loud at one point with a show band. So were you lucky enough that you always got to play what you love to play?
No, I mean, I think any musician, if you're trying to play music for a living, you have to be versatile, and to really, that's one of the things I believe that has been a true, kind of a secret weapon. Is I played so many different styles of music, and I love so many different styles of music. So I was one of those guys playing cover songs 6 nights a week for years and years and years, and I always had an original band. And then, in my early 20s, we had some success. We were called Plasticine, and we had some success in Canada. And we did many national tours and signed a big record deal with the Tragically Hips management, Jake Gold and Alan Gregg. And that was kind of an introduction into what the world of original music is for me. But then even then, that's all I did. I've never had a job, a quote unquote job in my life. I've just played music, right? And I also toured like with a country band in my 20s. We toured all over the place. I played with, Roy Clark in Branson, Missouri, and we played Opryland. And I did 7 weeks in the United States with a hip hop rock band named Kazzer as a hired gun guitar player. But I really think that to be a well-rounded musician, you shouldn't limit yourself to any one particular style of music, whether, like you say, whether it's Barry Manilow songs that you're playing or whatever. At some point, You're just building tools in your toolbox.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting. There are a lot of guys who refuse to do anything other than the music, but they don't have the open mind to do what it takes. Like you say, I did a lot of gigs and was in bands that I wasn't necessarily all that crazy to be in, but I had a job, and that's what it is, right? So, like any job, you have to be open to what the job requires.
Absolutely. Yeah, 100%. And I was, to me, playing guitar and working on music and trying to be a better singer and, performer, songwriter, all of those things, they, they, they never really seemed like work to me. Like, yeah, it's work and that's what you do to put food on the table. But, to me, it was always, I loved it so much I just knew that that's what I was going to do.
Now, did you ever feel like you had to kind of adapt to get into a role, to do certain things? Like, for example, when I was in a show band way back when, they had me do an Elvis medley. And so I thought, this is either really going to suck or I'm going to get into the role and make it something. And so people loved it, and I wasn't the kind of guy who would go around singing Elvis songs, on the street, whatever. But did you ever find yourself in a position like that where you had to adapt to a role in order to do the job?
I never really went that way. Adapting to anything else, I think I always brought, my own personality to everything that I did. When I was a sideman, a guitar player for hire with a country show band, there was not really any adaptation required, but I had to wear a suit and be sit at the back, and I wasn't, I had to fit in with the group. I wasn't, necessarily when it was my feature, they would bring me out to the front of the stage, and I do some Chet Atkins kind of thing, guitar playing stuff. But I suppose that's a form of adaptation. But I never really had to do anything else.
It's a lot of work sometimes. I had a gig a few years ago where I had to cover some Brad Paisley stuff, and man, that's no walk in the park, especially like I've always learned by ear. So to pick up
Right.
on some of his Telecaster wizardry was just like hours and hours, and I knew I had to get it right, you know. But
Oh yeah, of course. Yeah, yeah. I mean, anything you approach, you got to approach it with the respect it deserves, and you got to put in the time, right? But then the other thing about that kind of stuff when you're doing that, as you probably know yourself, is you carry that forward. You carry that forward to the next thing, right? So then, the next thing you're going to do is you're going to be able to pick up on that a lot quicker because you just spent all those hours learning the Brad Paisley stuff, right?
yeah, no
And of
kidding.
course, he got it from somewhere, and he got it from Danny Gatton, and Danny Gatton got it from Les Paul, and all that stuff. So it all kind of blends together. But you got to put in the time for sure. You got to do the woodshedding.
Absolutely. And I find it's interesting how the evolution of guitar has come to about over the years. Back in the 50s and the 60s, really, unless you were listening to a jazz guy, there wasn't much there in the way of lead guitar playing, like very simple, basic stuff. And then it evolved all the way to where it is today, where guys like you are saying, look, I got to play the Chet Atkins and the Brad Paisley if I want to move forward with what I'm doing, you know?
Yeah, it all depends. I mean, I loved all the old stuff. That's why I fell in love listening to a guy like Mel Brown, where I grew up down the road from where you are in Kitchener, and Mel Brown had jazz influence, and you know, he listened to all of that amazing stuff, and to me, it's like the deeper I go back, the more amazing it is. You listen to Wes Montgomery, you listen to just mind blowing stuff. And that was all very early, but it's all one person builds on the next and builds on the next. And you just try and bring a unique approach in yourself and the way that you approach the music. And I think that's what makes a guitar player stand out.
Yeah, I guess, there's always been treasure out there in terms of artists to watch and listen to, but I guess I was referring to the popular stuff from back in the day wasn't really evolved to where it is now. There's always been heart and soul, don't get me wrong. I mean, some of that early blues stuff just can give you the shivers, just the booming voices. Some of these guys were like, uh, there was a guy, I can't remember what his name is now, but he was an older black fellow that toured around Southern Ontario, and he didn't use them. He'd stand about 10 feet away from his mic, you know, and just the guts and the soul, unbelievable in some of that old stuff, you know.
Yeah, it's pretty incredible, man. Absolutely.
Yeah. So you're on tour currently, and the last album has done fairly well. Tell us about that record and what you've got coming up too.
Well, are you talking about the Thunderbirds record?
Your own album.
Okay, my own records. It was the Strong and Blues Remedy, which had a few different guests on it, and it was interesting because the label wanted me to do a record that had featured some other guests, like almost like a collaborative, which was a bit of a different approach for me to put together. I had Harrison Kennedy, Don Tyler Watson, and Crystal Schwanda, and Steve Mariner, and approaching songs, right, co-writing with those artists and having them guest on the record was different than having a Steve Strongman solo record. And then that segued right into the Thunderbirds record, right into co-writing with Kim Wilson, and doing all the pre-production in New York, and being with the band recording the album. Then, so in a lot of ways, it's been a very long time since for me to do a Steve Strongman record. It's been a long time. So I'm really excited about kind of moving forward now, and seeing, okay, where am I at? And as every writer probably will tell you, your experience bleed into what you're working on now. So I'm excited about this next stage for me. It's definitely going to be a Steve Strongman solo record, but after touring here in Mexico and then doing shows in Jamaica next week, and then I go to California to do some writing with Kim again. We're going to go to the Grammys, which I'm looking forward to. And then, sitting around writing with Kim, we're going to do some work there. And whether that ends up being on a Steve Strongman solo record, or whether that ends up being on a Kim Wilson solo record, or the next Fabulous Thunderbirds record, or who knows where those songs will end up. I'm really excited to focus on writing right now. And I'm also touring Western Canada when I get back too.
Cool, cool. Now, any of the promo shots I've seen of you, you're playing a hollow body Gibson. Is that an ES335 or what is your favorite go-to axe?
Yeah, I'm a 335 man for sure. I love it. I fell in love with the 335. I guess my first one I got was just over 30 years ago, and I've never really looked back. To me, it's the most versatile guitar that you can get. I mean, you can play jazz on it, rock, anything, shred blues, do whatever you want on the thing. It's amazing. So I completely fell in love. It just felt like me. And recently in the studio, I was working a lot with a Les Paul, playing a lot of Les Paul tones, and as much as I loved that, and that was great, as soon as I put the 335 on it, it just feels like coming home.
Yeah, I had for years and years, I had a solid body 335. It's like three-quarter scale to the original. And it was a beautiful guitar. And guys have said to me, we thought you'd take that one to the grave. But a few years ago, I started having some rotator cuff and tennis elbow issues, which have somehow gone away. But at the time, I thought I've got to go to a lighter guitar. So I sold it. I regret it because any 335 is a beautiful guitar, but then it's interesting. I was in a guitar shop in London a few years ago, and I'll just show you.
Oh yeah.
This is my Ibanez AR 250, and it's almost a clone of what the solid body
Yeah.
335 was. And I didn't even realize it
It's
when I bought it.
that's the artist series, the
Yeah,
Ibanez
the
artist
AR
series.
250. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a great guitar, man. It's killer guitar. Actually, I'm on touring here. The guy who's here in Mexico is playing one of those. I was just playing one of those yesterday.
Well, I'm sure you're aware of who Bill Durst is, if you're from
Of course,
Kitchener. Yeah,
yeah.
so Bill and I are doing a show in March at the Aeolian, and I handed him that guitar a while ago, and he said, "That's one MF and shred machine, man." you know.
Yeah.
But so I kind of still do have a solid body 335, even though it's not. But yeah, those and there's a big difference too in the tonality of the different guitars. Like I've got a couple of custom built. I've got a custom built Strat and a custom built Telly, and I find that for certain sounds I have to play one or the other, you know. But I can't shred on those like I can the artist.
Right. Yeah. Well, I mean, to each his own. They all have different benefits. I mean, to me, I have lots of guitars, but they all get played. You know what I mean? And they're all different. They all do different things. Even the 335s that I have, they're supposed to be exactly the same because that's what I wanted. I wanted an exact. I want this one, but they're different. Even when I went to Memphis and I was at the plant for Gibson because I'm a proud Gibson endorsee. Of course, I was blown away by the attention to detail and how they hand sand the necks and they feel differently. So it has to be within specs, but things are under a microscope, like they're making sure. But they're all different. They all speak differently. They sound differently. Every single guitar says something.
It's interesting, I've for years and years I kind of had a love-hate relationship with Fender guitars because I could never get one off the rack that was exactly what I wanted, you know. And that's why I've got some custom builds now because like you have your relationship with Gibson, there's nothing like being able to say, look, I want this and I want that. I need this and need that. So that's to have a Gibson endorsement, man, that'd be a dream for me.
Yeah, it's pretty great. I mean, again, that whole process came about pretty organically because I was playing Gibsons anyway, and so I've been with them a really long time. I got involved with them in my 20s, and I've been able to go to NAM and work with Gibson and do showcases at the NAM show, and that led to a few different opportunities. But yeah, I mean, I absolutely love Gibsons. But yeah, to your point, Fenders, I just recently got a Strat, and I'd never owned a Strat in my life. Because when I was coming up, probably the same as you, it was everybody had Strats. Stevie Ray Vaughan was the king, and we all absolutely loved what Stevie was doing. But every single person I ever saw, every guitar player had a Strat, and I get it. The Strats they do that thing incredibly well, and you can't come close to it with anything else, really. Well, you can come close to it, but it's never exactly it. The Strats, right? So I was asked to do take part in a celebration of some of Eric Clapton's music, and I said, "Well, I got a Strat for this." And so I ended up grabbing a Strat from a friend of mine, and I called him up and said, "Well, we got a problem now because now I got to convince you to sell it to me." So I ended up buying this gorgeous Strat that was actually made from a friend of a friend out in California. Kid Anderson made it, and anyway, it's a beautiful Strat, and I love it, man. It's cool. So I get it. I totally get why people just go, that's it. But like we were talking about earlier, every guitar having its own thing. Strats definitely have their own thing. 335s definitely have their thing, and so do Les Pauls. So it's and I love it. We're always searching for those tones.
Yeah, no kidding. I was in the studio a while back, and a friend of mine wanted me to play his Les Paul Standard in the studio. And this is one of the more recent models, and I couldn't get it to stay in tune, no matter what I did.
Yeah,
So I ended up playing um, I ended up playing the bed tracks on my telly. And then I said to Buddy, look, I'll use this one for some lead work later on, whatever. I took it to my guy, had it set up, and for about a day, I thought, yeah, that's what a Les Paul's supposed to be like. Go into the studio, can't keep it in tune. So the engineer hands me a Fender Jag, and I really didn't realize how much of a boat those things are. Like it was huge, but it added something to the record that I wasn't going to get with a Les Paul or anything else. So back to the
sure.
unique personality of every guitar. But have you ever played a Jag?
Not really. I picked them up in a music store at some point along the line just to check them out. But I found the same thing. Gibsons can be fickle. It depends on the instrument. But man, I couldn't believe it. Like Strats. Like the thing is just a big solid hunk of wood that is screwed together and it's not moving. You can beat the crap out of that thing, man. And so yeah, I can. They have the design that like Leo Fender was onto something, obviously. So I
Yeah.
mean, they really don't move. I was blown away. Like I can't believe like the tellies are the same. Like they just behave so well, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've been in situations where my other guitars weren't doing it. I pick up the telly, and bang, it's just spot on in tune and not as easy to play as the Ibanez or the Gibsons, but you want a guitar to be in tune. I think it's the string alignment. The strings are basically straight,
Yeah,
whereas with the other design, I think that affects the intonation, the way they spread out. But
yeah. And the neck angle too on a Gibson, you know, we're getting a little deeper into the woods here. I don't know what kind of if your listeners are hardcore guitar players or not, but yeah, the angle, the neck angle a little bit. That's why the when you drop a Les Paul, sometimes then they always break up at the neck because there's that slight pitch back, of course, which does affect everything else. But like they're strats, if you look at where the neck at the headstock is at the back, they're so thick, right? Like there's so much support there. It's unbelievable. So it's just, you can beat the hell out of that thing, man.
I had my old Strat. The last one I had was an American Standard. And I went to grab my Gibson off my rack and I knocked the Strat off the rack and it bounced off the drum riser and then landed face down on the stage. And I kind of freaked out, but I picked it up and I looked at it and I went, folks, this is why you buy a Stratocaster because they're bulletproof.
Oh yeah.
Big difference. Yeah. Yeah, man. So where can people get your music, Steve?
The best thing to do is go to stevestrongman.com and everything branches out from there. I'm sure people in this day and age can find me on socials. I'm on all the socials, but the best thing to do is go to stevestrongman.com.
Cool. And do you have a Bandcamp page?
No, I don't have anything like that. I'm on all the, I'm out there on all the streaming
Okay.
services.
No, I just wonder about Bandcamp because they pay a better percentage to artists. And I won't go on about Spotify, but if you were at my show with Bill Durst, he would.
Oh yeah, I'm sure.
Yeah. Anyway, that said, what's next for you, Steve?
Well, yeah, like I said, just the new record, like that I'm working on. A lot of writing's going to be happening. Going to be on the road for about the next just over a month. But it's I'm up in Canada where you are and where I am. There's snow on the ground and it's 31 degrees here today, so I'm not complaining. It's pretty nice. And the shows we had a VIP show last night and we got sound check this afternoon. So it's everything's looking like it's going to be great. But I'll be back in the studio when I get home working on a new record.
Okay, cool. So now are you working on ideas as you're on the road?
They always, for me, it's never like, okay, I'm going to sit down and work on an idea. They're happening behind the scenes without me even realizing that they're happening, and I'll just make little notes on my phone or my notepad. Oh, this is kind of a cool idea. What about that? And then all of a sudden you sit down and they're there. So I'm always working on stuff, just little things that happen that make me think of a turn of phrase or a lick or whatever. So it never really goes away.
Cool, cool. Well, listen, Steve, I know you got a lot of stuff to go and do, sound check and all that, and so on. I don't want to take up your whole day, but I do want to thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to do this with me. And until next time,
Tommy, yeah, thank you so much, man. It's been a lot of fun talking to you. I appreciate it, and thanks for taking the time.
cool. Until next time, cheers. Tommy Solo's Famous Friends is a one-man production, meaning that I've done all the work, including recording, editing, guest acquisition, etc. And hey, here's some news. We've just recently joined forces with 519 Magazine, so you can check out my interviews there as well. The theme song for Tommy Solo's Famous Friends is a clip from my original composition, The Burn, all rights reserved. If you enjoy the show and you'd like to help us keep it going, why don't you click on the Buy Me a Coffee link in the show notes. Hit the like button, subscribe, all that stuff. We really appreciate it. You can find me on Facebook and Instagram. And until next time, cheers.